Hello, I'm Redefines. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. As always, I hope you enjoy the journey. This time around, we'll be attempting to cut through the fog of war as the messy, chaotic and frankly terrifying situation on the front lines between Russia and Ukraine continues to unfold. We've got Russia going full throttle into Ukraine, and Ukraine, not to be outdone, is hitting back where it hurts, into Russia's own backyard. Moscow's latest offensive has been focused on the town of Pokrovsk. Now, you might be thinking, Pokrovsk? Never heard of it. Why should I care? We'll try to show you how this town is the linchpin in Russia's strategy to make Ukraine's life even more miserable. First, let's take a look at our latest report.
The Russian blitz toward Pokrovsk, the critical logistical hub in Ukraine's Donbas Oblast, continues. Now Russian forces are just kilometers from the town, important because of its railroads. But the significance of the locality goes beyond the railroad, as Russia could gain control of the railroad without capturing the city using solely artillery and mortar fire, as well as drones.
The
situation on the Pokrovsk front is fairly difficult. Throughout the last week, 50 battles take place per day on average. The enemy is using its advantage in personnel, weapons and military equipment. Russia is actively using artillery and aviation.
Situated at a crossroads, Pokrovsk plays a crucial role in the transportation and distribution of supplies across the entire front line. The road linking Pokrovsk to Konstantinivka has been continuously targeted by Russia. Should Ukraine lose control of this road, the resupply of troops fighting in the Bakhmut-Horlivka sector would be seriously complicated. In a scenario when both roads and the railroad are lost, projection capabilities of Ukrainian forces in the Donbas would wane significantly, leading to the potential loss of Kurahove, Vuhledar, as well as areas both south and north of Toretsk. Meanwhile, using its newly and domestically made Palianytsia drone, Ukraine has successfully targeted Russian airfields and ammunition depots deep into Russia's territory. This should give a much-deserved respite to troops fighting on the ground.
The Kursk operation diverted a significant number of Russia's forces. As of now, we can say that around 30,000 servicemen have been sent to the Kursk front, and this figure is growing.
Whether Ukraine's Kursk offensive will alleviate the difficulties around Pokrovsk remains to be seen. The town's residents, however, have already been evacuated in anticipation of a Russian onslaught.
And now, as always, it's time to take a look at the issue in greater detail. So Pokrovsk isn't just some random dot on the map. It is a major logistics hub. If Russia takes control of it, they could severely disrupt Ukrainian supply lines and gain a significant foothold in the Donetsk region. For Ukraine, losing Pokrovsk could be a serious blow, like losing your team captain in the middle of a tournament. Painful, demoralizing, and potentially game-changing. However, while Russia is throwing everything they've got at Pokrovsk, they are not exactly having an easy time there. Ukrainian forces have been putting up fierce resistance, turning every inch of the battlefield into a quagmire for Russian troops. And it's not just soldiers on the ground. Ukraine has been using every trick in the book, from drone strikes to guerrilla tactics, to keep Russia from advancing even further. Now, this brings us to the other side of the coin, Ukraine's counteroffensive. You see, while Russia has been pounding Ukraine with consequent missile barrages, Kyiv has been quietly building up its own arsenal. And they're not just sitting around waiting. Recently, Ukraine has started launching its own strikes deep into Russian territory, and they're using some brand new homegrown toys to do it. I'm talking about a new long-range missile system that's giving Ukraine a chance to strike back without needing to rely on Western-supplied weapons. And here is where it gets even better, or worse if you're at the Kremlin. These strikes are bypassing the Western restrictions on how Ukraine can use its foreign-supplied weaponry. In other words, while NATO countries have been saying, okay, you can use our weapons, but just in Ukraine, or just a few inches into Russian territory, but no more, Ukraine has been saying, no problem, We just make our own weapons and use them wherever we want. Ukraine's recent strikes in the Kursk region, and now reportedly Belgorod as well, are a prime example. This is about sending a message. Ukraine is telling Russia, you're not safe just because you're behind your own borders. We can reach you, and we will. The psychological impact on Russia cannot be overstated. The Kremlin has been selling this narrative to its people that the war is something happening over there, far from the motherland. Therefore, now the Ukrainian incursion has to be downplayed. But with Ukrainian drones buzzing over Russian towns, that illusion is crumbling fast. These strikes also forcing Russia to divert resources, which means less firepower directed at Ukrainian cities and troops. The battle lines are being redrawn, literally and figuratively. Russia's offensive into Ukraine may have started as a steamroller, but now it's more like a rusted-out truck stuck in the mud. Meanwhile, Ukraine's counteroffensive is gaining momentum, and we're eager to see where it ends. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Rostislav Khotin, senior editor for the Ukrainian service at Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello.
So it is said that the operation in Kursk is intended to work as a diversion, to draw in more Russian forces. Unfortunately, this doesn't seem to work with the Pokrovsk front, because they are still pushing forward, right?
Yes, Russia is gaining territory in Donbas region in near Pokrovsk, to the southeast of Pokrovsk. Now Russian troops are about 10 kilometers from Pokrovsk and advancing slowly. But it's rather tactical gains, not strategic gains. But nevertheless, their strategic aim in the Donbas in eastern Ukraine remains the same. They want to occupy the whole Donbas, the Donetsk and Luhansk regions by the end of this year. They control around 90+ % of Luhansk region and about 2/3 of Donetsk region. So their strategic aim to get the full control of to advance to the administrative borders of Donetsk and Luhansk region by the end of 2024.
So how acute would be the loss of Pokrovsk, really? It is a major hub, and also it would have a psychological impact on the Ukrainian forces.
Yeah, from a psychological point of view, yes, it will be a kind of defeat for blow to Ukrainian state of morale. But nevertheless, let's not. I can agree with President Zelensky, who said that Putin is fighting for the town whose name he didn't even know before, Pokrovsk. We all know Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Dnipro, Zaporizhia, other big cities, but Russia is fighting, putting enormous efforts to get control of Pokrovsk, whom nobody knows and nobody knew before. So let's not exaggerate the strategic importance of Pokrovsk.
What about the railway connections, though? I mean, it has been pointed out that weapons transports would be made more difficult across the Donbass if Pokrovsk were to fall.
Yes. The strategic importance of this area is that the railway crosses this region, this area near Pokrovsk. Yeah, that's true. But we'll see. Ukrainian command and Ukrainian political leadership is saying that Russia won't be able to occupy the whole of Donbass by the end of this year for sure, and that's why this incursion into Russian Kursk region has happened because Ukraine wants to kind of in this mathematic game of arithmetics. You are gaining in the Donbass territorially, we are gaining in advancing in the Russian Kursk region, which is also, it's an enormous achievement already. Ukraine controls more than 1,250 square kilometers of Russian territory, sovereign Russian territory. Ukrainian troops have taken almost 600 Russian prisoners of war there, and also Ukraine now is in control of around 100 settlements in Russian Kursk region. So it's already an enormous achievement within less than 3 weeks of Ukrainian advance in the incursion into Kursk region.
They also seem to have crossed Russia's major red line, and yet nothing happened. Does it prove that Russia's red lines are fictitious in nature?
Absolutely, it was a red line from Russia from the beginning, from Putin, from his predecessor Dmitry Medvedev, who is now deputy chairman of Russian Security Council. That the red line is Ukraine should not enter Russian territory. Ukraine should not strike Russian territory. But Ukrainian strikes are happening almost on daily basis. Now the huge oil depot was hit in Rostov region near Ukraine on Russian territory, and Ukraine is striking other military and energy objects on Russian territory. We're not mentioning Crimea, Russian-occupied Crimea, or Russia-occupied territories of Ukraine. We are mentioning the proper territory of the Russian Federation, the sovereign Russian territory, like in Belgorod region, in Rostov, near Volga River, and so on and so forth. We are talking about the strikes against energy and infrastructure and military infrastructure on the proper territory of the Russian Federation. And another red line was, of course, Ukrainian incursion. Before, there were several, 2 or 3 incursions by Russian volunteers who are fighting for Ukraine into Russian territory. But this time it's different. This time it's armed forces, official armed forces of Ukraine have entered sovereign Russian territory. That differs this operation from previous incursions by Russian volunteers.
So perhaps Russia's statement that, a threat to sovereignty would provoke a nuclear strike really meant a threat to Moscow, St. Petersburg, anywhere where Putin's residence is located, perhaps. But sarcasm aside, we need to take a look at the long-range weapons situation. Ukraine is actually making some important announcements concerning the development of its own weapons. Now, it is, of course, prudent for Ukraine to have its own arsenal, but it wouldn't be doing that if it was not constrained by Western allies who say, well, you can use our weapons, but not to strike this area, not to strike that area. So do you think that this is really what, it was possible to predict that it would happen, that Ukraine would be trying to get around this by developing its own long-range strike capabilities?
While still the debate among Western partners of Ukraine is going on whether to allow Ukraine to strike Russian territory with Western-supplied weapons and so on and so forth, Ukraine, meanwhile, is making huge efforts of developing its own capabilities, arms capabilities, to be able to strike wherever and whenever it wants, even Russian territory. Just a few days ago, there was an announcement that Ukraine has produced the first own-made missile drone called Palianytsia. Its missile which will be launched from the drone, already giving advantage of this missile strike over other missile systems. And secondly, Zelensky, during his press conference, announced the successful test of a Ukrainian-made ballistic missile. We don't know any details so far. We only know that there was a test. This test was successful, and Ukraine is about to start producing its own made ballistic missile, which already kind of puts Ukraine in the exclusive club of owners and producers of ballistic missiles, which fly over a kind of very high trajectory and very difficult to intercept. And Ukraine will be able to use it against Russian forces in Ukraine and military objects on the Russian territory.
So let's begin with this hybrid missile drone system. You said that what we know is that it is actually like a two-staged system, that it approaches the target area as a drone, and then are you saying that basically the missile detaches itself, increases speed, and operates more like a cruise missile towards the end of the run? So essentially this gives it like an extended range.
Yes, it's a double stage kind of action. First of all, the drone is launched. Drone is going up to the necessary height and then while approaching the target, it launches a missile from this drone launches missile which has a reactive engine and very fast, very speedy, and it hits the target not with the speed of drone, the power of drone, but with the power of reactive powerful missile. So it's kind of two-stage thing, and Ukraine is one of the first to produce such drone/missile, and they deliberately, the name for it was chosen the word Palianytsia, as a kind of bread, special kind of Ukrainian traditional bread, which the very word Palianytsia was as a kind of test for during the first months of the war, when Ukraine wanted to test whether they were spies acting on Ukrainian territory, and the Russians apparently cannot pronounce properly the Ukrainian old Ukrainian word Palianytsia.
So if they cannot pronounce the word, they might not be able to intercept the missile as well, which, I mean, it sounds like a sound design principle. You fly it to the target, and then at the final stage, you make it more difficult to shoot down. Now, as for the ballistic missile, I know it is sketchy. We don't really know much, but could it be related to the Sapsan/Krim missile program? Because that was a ballistic missile that had been in development even before the war started.
Yeah, Ukrainian military complex, Ukrainian military industry is booming. It's alive and kicking very well. The war, of course, gave this boost to domestic producers. Ukraine, for instance, is now pioneering using drones, normal drones, and was definitely one of the pioneers in developing sea drones, which already damaged about 1/3 of Russian Black Sea Fleet based in Crimea and Sevastopol. So
the sea drones were a resounding success. I mean,
absolutely,
many people in the West were surprised at how well this worked, right?
Yeah, more than 30% of Russian Black Sea Fleet already has been destroyed by Ukrainian missiles, and especially sea drones. And also, Ukraine, just want to remind you that at the initial stage of the war in April 2022, Ukrainian-made Neptune missile strike Russian cruiser Moskva, the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet in the Black Sea. And it was like an enormous success. And Ukraine constantly underlines that these are Ukrainian domestically produced weapons. And even Ukrainian leadership established a day of Ukrainian military industry on the very day when the cruise ship Moskva, Russian cruise ship, was sunk. So now Ukrainian military industry celebrates its own day, its own kind of holiday in April, every April. So it's going to be a very big success. And this ballistic missile is also Ukrainian development. But we don't know many details. Zelensky was very kind of short in his comments. He only announced that there was a test, and this test was successful. Nothing, no more information has been provided so far by Ukrainian political leadership and military leadership.
Which, of course, seems prudent in order to protect the military secrets from any sort of infiltration by the enemy. Of course, right now it's going to be a battle for the funding in order to implement these programs on a broader scale. Hopefully, it is successful. For the time being, Rostislav Hotin was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a curated selection of all the other stories from the East that you really don't want to miss. Russia may be continuing to cover Ukraine with a rain of rockets, but Kyiv has recently gotten itself its first domestically produced ballistic missile. Ukraine's president has said that the country had conducted the first test of the weapon. More on this in our report.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced that Kyiv had carried out its first test of a domestically produced ballistic missile, dubbing it a new class of weapon for Ukraine. The official added that Ukraine was working on developing the Hrim-2 short-range ballistic missile system, a design combining the features of a tactical missile system and a multiple rocket launcher. Last weekend, Zelensky also confirmed the existence of the domestically produced Palianytsia missile, boasting a reported range of about 1,500 kilometers.
The world loves South Korean kimchi, sure enough, but some parts of it give preference to North Korean arms, specifically Russia. More on Moscow ramping up its North Korean armory imports in this next news piece.
Russia has been stepping up imports of North Korean arms to pursue its criminal project in Ukraine. Ever since mid-2022, over 13,000 containers allegedly holding weapons arrived from North Korea to Russia. Fragments of those objects, missiles to be precise, have repeatedly been found in Ukrainian cities following Russian air raids. The latest intelligence report indicated the North Korean eastern port of Najin as the export outlet for the arms. Over 2 years' time, Pyongyang has shipped 6,152mm artillery shells from that port into Russia.
Georgia is standing at a crossroads, with one path leading towards Europe, the other one receding into Russia, to paraphrase the Georgian president's recent cautionary remark. The call to wisdom of Georgian voters resounded as the country is heading towards parliamentary elections.
Georgian President Salome Zurabishvili has signed a decree announcing October 26th, the last Saturday of October, as the day for the parliamentary ballot, dubbing it the Day of Survival. She told voters that they would have to choose between war and peace in the election. In reality, Georgia's long-time aspiration to join the Western Club of NATO and the European Union has been brought to a halt in recent years due to Tbilisi's visible turn towards Russia. Brussels has halted EU accession talks with Tbilisi and the US, miffed by Georgia over the recently adopted foreign agent law, has undertaken a compromise review of relations.
As the Taliban regime imposes new restrictions on women, European Union humanitarian aid keeps flowing into the country. Working with non-governmental organizations, the EU has been sending help worth tens of millions of euros into Afghanistan.
Going into force on the third anniversary of a suicide bombing at Hamid Karzai International Airport that killed 13 US soldiers and tens of Afghans during the haphazard US withdrawal, the decree imposes further restrictive dress codes for women. It also says voices of women must not be heard in public, effectively depriving them of freedom of speech. Meanwhile, Afghanistan, or rather its NGOs to be precise, continues to be one of the top recipients of EU aid. The bloc has sent 125 million euros worth of help to the country this year alone using various means, including air bridge flights. These have carried a total of 1,600 tons of aid since 2021.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.